Hey guys, this is Steve Huff from SteveHuffPhoto.com, and it's time for another flashback. I know some of you guys have been enjoying these videos, and I have a ton more that I can do. Today, I am taking a look back at a classic vintage Nikon vintage rangefinder lens. This is a lens I found in screw mount, Leica screw mount, which is easily adapted to Leica M mount with just a cheap adapter that you can find anywhere on Amazon, B&H Photo, anywhere you go pretty much for your photo gear. Well, not anywhere, but the big shops and Amazon. This is a very unique lens. It's a 35mm f1.8, but it has a beautiful rendering, and it's a rare lens, and I'm not sure what they go for today, but you can probably check on eBay. Wait, hold on a minute. I'll just check eBay right now. So the screw mount version is crazy rare. I couldn't even find one on eBay, but here are a couple of this lens, a few of these lenses in S mount, which is, I believe, a little different from the screw mount that I had. So it's a very rare lens. I know it's not cheap, but it's a beautiful little lens. And I want to emphasize the word little because this guy is small, as you saw in the beginning. I used it on an M240 at the time. I also used it on a Leica M monochrome. I wrote about this lens twice on my website, as well as did a quick comparison against a Voigtlander 35 f1.2. If you want to see either of those articles with photos, I'll put a link in the description below. Here is a photo shot with this lens and the Leica monochrome, the original monochrome, which actually I prefer to the monochrome 246. That original monochrome just had a unique style about the way it rendered black and white images, where the new one is nice as well, but it seems to render more like an M240 where you convert a file to black and white. So I really had a connection with that. There's Debbie with a Halloween mask on, by the way. I had a connection to that original monochrome, and here I was when I was a little more beefed up. I used to work out a lot more than I do these days. But the lens renders nicely. All these shots that you're going to see here were taken wide open at f1.8. It has a beautiful way, kind of a middle bokeh. The middle of the frame has kind of a little bit of a swirl to the bokeh. But again, on the monochrome, this was a great lens. Here I was at some kind of gathering or protest. I'm not really sure what it was. I stumbled onto it while driving around downtown Phoenix. You had people for immigrants and people against immigrants, and this was years ago now. This isn't anytime recent. So these are photos I shot, maybe in 2013, so maybe 5 years ago. But the lens did very well with the monochrome. Here was some kind of news or podcast. I don't know who was filming, but this guy was talking and supporting Sheriff Joe here in Arizona, and then there were others who were not supporting Sheriff Joe. And when I go into something like this, I just photograph both sides of it. I don't pick sides. I don't go in with a bias. I just like to document as a photographer, which is what you should do when you're a photographer, right? You document the whole story. This was just a shot here to show the way the light renders with this lens. Here's one of the guys that was at this meetup, or whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't say it was a protest because nobody was screaming and yelling, and everybody was peaceful, but everybody stayed on their own side. So this guy was proud of his car and his "Don't Tread on Me" shirt. And here was a mother and son looking for immigration reform, of course, and he was holding up the American flags. I really like this image because I love the way this lens rendered it, and I love the way the monochrome just draws the image. Here's a few more people holding up their sign, and it wasn't too crowded, actually. There was maybe total by the peak, maybe 75 people there. It was a warm day, but it was also a nice day, so I was out there. The cameras gave me no issues. Here's one of the guys talking to some of the kids. and he was kind of eyeballing me like, why are you taking my picture? But when you're in a situation like this, you're allowed to take pictures. You're out in public, right? So you're allowed to document and photograph the happenings. Now here's Debbie. This is near my house at a park, shot with the 35 1.8. We're changing it up a bit, getting away from the protest and just testing the lens out. I wanted to see how it did for portraits and just in general on a nice day. As you can see, it renders nicely. It's a little bit vintage in its rendering. It's a little bit classic, but it stays sharp at the focus point, which of course was on her eyes here. Again, using the Leica M monochrome. When you get a lens like this, it's really fun to use because they're so small and you never know the rendering you're going to get. I remember hanging out with good friend Ashwin, and he had like cases of vintage lenses, and one day we were just slapping them all on the M, and I plopped this one on and I was like, I love this lens. And I went out, and it took me a little while to find one because, as I said, they're rare. Look at the way the bouquet is rendered here on the flowers. That's the signature of this lens wide open. It's different than most other lenses. It's not going to give you that perfectly smooth bouquet, but like it almost renders the little bit of backgrounds as little bubbles. So I've never really seen a lens quite like it. So let's move on to more photos. Actually, we're moving on to a new lens. This is the Nikkor 85 f2, and I had one in screw mount, and I used them together. So I had a classic 35 and an 85, and I actually had two of these lenses here. So this lens was quite interesting indeed. It was a brick, a tank, built like you can put it in front of a semi-truck, let the truck run it over, and it wouldn't be harmed. That's the confidence you got when you held this lens. That's what you thought, like, wow, this lens is amazing. It's the Nikkor 8.5 85mm f2, and again, I had this in LTM mount. You can find these on eBay, but they're another rare lens because it's known for its beauty for actually just everything, portraits. And again, here is a shot. I think this was one of the first test shots when I got the lens. It was Mother's Day, and I wanted to see the rendering. I'm not really a huge fan of 85mm lenses these days. I used to be, but it has its place for sure. Here's a test portrait in my backyard of my friend Mike. The eyes are razor sharp here because this lens, wide open at f2, even though it's vintage and it's old, it is still very sharp, and you can take some beautiful portraits with it. Here I had a pair of goofy like 1970s glasses that I found at a Goodwill, and I did a whole photo series with a bunch of people wearing them. This was my friend Mike wearing them, and in the next one I gave him a shovel and I said, let's look like a serial killer, like in the making here. So I put the glasses on him, and he's holding the shovel, and it's pretty interesting. I remember doing some of these with Debbie and Debbie's daughter and my son and another friend, and I had a whole series with these traveling glasses. Here's an indoor shot in my living room with basically just some window light coming in. This is Debbie at f2 using that 85mm. Focusing, I believe, if I remember correctly, it had a pretty long focus throw, which made it easy to nail the focus because you can be accurate. These were those Mother's Day roses, probably a couple days later as they started to wilt. But you can see how the background is blown out. You can see the character of the bouquet that this lens gives. This was an out of focus shot. I was taking a shot of my Chihuahua walking into the frame to kind of do a surrealish, abstract kind of look with the monochrome. But overall, this is a really nice lens if you can find one. Again, I had it in screw mount. That makes it easy to mount to a Leica M or even an SL. So this is Steve Huff. There I am back in the day with the 85 f2. You could check out these lenses on eBay. Just search for them. And I will have more flashbacks coming. I think my next flashback will be the Voigtlander 35 f1.2, as I have a slew of photos with that I'd love to share. And I have one again that I'm using with the Leica SL. So be sure to check back. I'll also have a couple new reviews next week right here. Thumbs up and subscribe, and thank you guys. I'll see you next time.